now I want to show you this. I always keep it covered till the last minute because I don't want to open it up and let it start to get dry. Okay, so when I say strength and elasticity, this is what I'm talking about. You know, if you did this with all-purpose dough, it would just tear right now. And if you did it with a coarse grind flour, you wouldn't have this smooth, almost taffy-like appearance. So this flour is going to yield strength, elasticity to actually make the pizzas, but tenderness, you know, to fold that over. And then the long fermentation, look at the formation in there. Isn't that beautiful? So and it's another reason why we handle it by hand. We don't use a rolling pin or put it in a machine and press all that out. So now I'll show you how to.
Would that be like a 70% water content?
Hydration. This is 68% hydration. The recipes that we're using.
Do you see any difference between that 2%?
No. But lower than 65%. Yes, it's a drier. It doesn't char and it doesn't move so quickly. You know, when it hits the heat. So, I mean, water really facilitates fermentation. So, okay, now your dough. After it's fully proofed, it's time to portion it. Okay, so we use this bench knife, dough scraper. Over time, you get accustomed to the volume by feel and by weight, but for consistency, and I did weigh out the dough balls today, so these little ones are good. So 8 to 8.5. Oh my gosh, it's perfect.
Go girl. You're really the master.
Well, like I said, you just get accustomed to the size, but this is also dough ball, probably number 100 million, that I've done. So.
And how long have they been inside the fridge for fermentation?
I made this dough. Today is Saturday. I made this dough on Tuesday and let it sit out at room temp for a couple of hours, and then it was in a big 22-quart container covered with plastic, just left alone in the refrigerator. So I want to show you. So you've mixed, you've kneaded, you've proofed, you've gone through your fermentation, and you portion it. On the website, it will say how many 7-ounce, 8-ounce, 9-ounce dough balls each batch will make, so you have flexibility. The personal pizzas in the 8.5 ounce size, I'll make little 5-ounce dough balls for appetizer pizzas with smoked salmon and fromage blanc and dill, things like that, mushrooms and truffle, and pass those at a party. I also have experience now through some of my catering clients of making, this is 8.5 ounces, making dough balls that were 25 and 30 ounces. It was like wrestling a loaf of bread. But they bake them and sell them by the slice. So, what did we alter in the baking? It cooked the same. It was really beautiful. It took a little bit longer, but the style was just the same. So you have a lot of flexibility. But the 7, 8, 9 is the most common. So then you need to roll this blob into an actual dough ball. And there's a couple ways to do this. This is one. I'm pushing with this part of my hand, and the dough ball, the outside of it is adhering to the tabletop. So I'm not putting a lot of flour on that, or it'll slide the thing around, and I will have lost my traction. So my fingers are cupped and rolled into a dough ball. Or you can.
For that material that you're rolling it on?
A stone is preferable, or stainless steel. Yeah, absolutely. It tends to stick to the wood. And definitely, I don't do tile where you have grout. I had a woman get angry at me one time because I said, just dump the dough out on the counter and roll the dough on. She got angry at me because she had to use a toothbrush to clean the grout joints out. So I just didn't think that through for her. So I learned from it. Okay, so that method, or picking it up and using 2 hands to pull the outside of that nice and smooth. I like this method best because you can do 2 at a time. You know, it's just a short range of motion. Your fingers are never extended or you'd be sliding this around the table. And you want to learn to work quickly because your body temperature heats up that dough. So this is what it looks like as it's first formed, and this is what they look like relaxed. Okay, these are ready now that I can hand stretch them. I rolled them out this morning about 8:30. They sat out at room temperature for maybe an hour or so, and this is chilled dough, and then I put it in the refrigerator to slow it down. And from this point on, managing your dough is all about the time and the temperature. You need to be able to inspect it and see where you are, in regards to that overproofing situation, because if it bubbles at the top and gets too warm, and it'll look like pancake batter after a while, and you've lost the window of opportunity to bake with it. So keep an eye on it. I hold these in the proofing boxes. This is a full-size commercial one. I have them in a size that's half this for home use. You can stack them, and you only need 1 lid at the top. So when we're getting ready to do a big event and we have dozens and dozens of these, I'm always just picking it up and poking and feeling, because that's how you can tell if the dough is starting to get too warm, too soft, and needs to go back in refrigeration.
Once you put them in the proofing tray, you leave them in there for a couple days.
No, because the mass is so small, it will overproof even in the refrigerator in 2 days, maybe a day, part of a day. But that's why I like to keep it, if I'm not using it right away, keep it in the bulk form, because it'll last a long time. As a matter of fact, I've had it in bulk form sometimes for over a week, and the top might get a little discolored and dry. I just cut that cap off. The underside is just gorgeous in its structure. So if you're the one managing, this is what you want to be aware of. If it starts to look dim in that bake chamber, that's your call to action. You need to get in there and stoke the fire or add more wood, or do both. I mean, we're going into cooking, so I'm going to go ahead and add wood, and I'm going to stoke this and get my light to pop back up so that I can easily see and manage my pizzas.
So is there a time where you don't want to add more wood, besides stop cooking?
Yes, like at home where I have 1 oven, I cook every course out of it. So when I'm finished with, say, pizzas as the appetizer or whatever I'm cooking at a high temperature, towards the end of that, I just add less wood. And instead of having a large flame that's keeping my deck temperature up to maximum, I drop to a vertical flame, and the whole oven will cool 100 degrees to that mid-range, which we call the roasting environment. So by the time you've done what you just saw in the last hour, build a fire in the center, go around the perimeter, bank the fire, you've saturated those components completely, you've established the bed of coals, so now the flame does all the maintenance work for you. So if you maintain the flame will maintain the deck temperature, whether you need it at a high temperature, a medium, or a low temperature. It's the size of the flame. And when we talk about the contour of the overhead, when they went from individual bricks that were straight and the flames went straight up the sidewall, this tilts in, and there's a flat portion to the center of the ceiling. So the flame migrates up the sidewall and goes across, and that's also another very effective part of the cooking cycle. But this is what you want to see in terms of light, okay? Okay, so then for making the pizzas for home use, I recommend this as your work surface. That way, if your oven's outside and you're making inside, you can make it, carry it out, load it, bring it back. Restaurants can have refrigerator prep tables that's all they work off of all day because it's in front of or adjacent to the oven. For this, you just want to put a little bit of your flour, and this does not need to be your good pizza flour. This could be all-purpose or rice flour. Just stay away from the granular flours like cornmeal or semolina. those tend to, raise the dough up off the floor just a little bit. They act like little marbles underneath the dough. So in non-porous cooking surfaces like, electric and gas deck ovens, the heat can go under the pizza and you get a crispy crust. Here, this floor is porous finish to receive the steam from the dough. So you want the dough in maximum contact with it so it steams off and you get that nice speckled char on the underside. Okay, so this method of stretching, the first part to stretching the dough ball is not to stretch it at all. If you approach a dough ball and pull laterally, you'll overstretch the center and get a thin spot that you can't make thick again, and it'll break in the oven. So the first step is just direct overhead pressure. Flatten this out so you have this even thickness disc. Okay, once it's an even thickness disc, you're good to go to start stretching. And I put my fingers here on the underside and I pull. I'll try to do in slow motion, one full strong pull so it goes through the center, so you don't have to go back and redo the center. And then I switch to just the perimeter. And I keep it down on that wooden peel. Okay. After you've practiced this. So again, we flatten that disc out, come in with my fingers, pull, and see how far apart my hands are? They're shoulder width apart. And if you keep it real close like this, you just get a thick center and undulating edges. So I don't even look at it anymore because you get accustomed to the thickness, between your fingertips, and you know where to pull. And my thumbs are just inside the edge on the top, and that's what's going to form that nice puffy rim around the exterior once it's baked. This could be larger than that. Sometimes I pull this same amount of dough in a wooden peel that's that big, just for a very thin, crackery flatbread. So you could take those recipes with the 7, 8, 9 ounce dough balls, and you can make them as thick or as thin, as you want. So that little bit of flour underneath here is important because then you top it, your pizza, and that's what facilitates this sliding. So just for the classica pizza margherita, this is the San Marzano tomatoes that are uncooked and unseasoned. Unlike American style pizza sauce that's cooked and seasoned, this is just a standalone tomato ingredient that we can now season many, many ways.
So that's just straight from the can?
It is. The imported DOP San Marzano tomatoes, and you can put them through a food mill. You can crush them by hand. I like sometimes the chunky nature of just taking them out of the can and crushing them onto the pizza. And if I'm going to slice the pizza into wedges for sharing and tasting like today, I like to put the basil down in the tomato. It will infuse the tomato. Okay, then this is the fresh mozzarella. And then just a little bit of pecorino or parmigiano is ideal. Then you're ready to launch this into the oven. So again, do a last check on your fire. See if you have to sweep the floor. Ensure that you have illumination in the deck. And then be ready. I always suggest when you get up to this spot right here, it's warm. And if you stand there and think too long or hesitate, the pizza tends to stick to itself. And then you go forward and all the toppings fly off and the dough sticks on the wooden peel. But this has a beveled edge. It's intended to hit the oven floor and slide, okay? So be ready, come up and hit the floor and slide off. If you,
It's so easy.
it is. And I would say if you make a pizza, I'll make one later that's heavily topped, you can set it on the floor and shimmy that out. So if you haven't seen this, so come up and look. It's fast. Wherever it lands, by the way, leave it there for 20 seconds or so and let that dough steam off into the fire brick base and let it set the underside so there's some rigidity sufficient to get your turning peel underneath it. Otherwise, if you go to turn it right away and it's raw floppy dough, it'll fold and push on itself and you'll form a pizza accordion, you know. And see the rationale for banking the fire on the side because you can see. And now I can watch the side next to the fire, and yes, we're getting speckled char on that side, and I can come in and turn it when it's a quantity that's sufficient, you know, to my liking. Too much, as I said, is bitter and dry. Not enough is just not flavorful. So when you have sufficient browning, take your turning peel and it goes under half the pizza on the side next to the fire, and then pull it towards you and turn. Same thing with the back one, pull it towards you and turn. So this size oven will accommodate 6. We could do rotation of 6 pizzas. I think at home most of the time people do 1 or 2 at a time, and we divide the labor, have a maker and a baker. So if you're entertaining, someone's always making and someone's baking, and it's just a continuous production of delicious, fresh, you know, warm pizzas coming out of the oven. So again, I've got sufficient browning on that portion of the crust, so I'm going to do another turn. Pizzas really should only be turned 2 or 3 times maximum, and you don't need to raise it up to the ceiling in this oven because the ceiling, the vault is lower. And this is, I would say, kind of a medium thickness. We could go thinner, and for people that like it a lot thicker, just make it a smaller diameter disc and a thicker crust. And then how do you know it's baked, cooked all the way through? You should have the browning that's sufficient around the edge to your liking. And you should be able to look in here and see that there's bubbling through the center of that pizza. That tells us the heat's penetrated the depth of all those ingredients. And then smell. You should smell. I think that's very appetizing, you know, the bit of char. So what you're looking for is that crunch on the outside, but it's a short bake at a high temperature and a moist environment, by the way. When you burn wood, even seasoned wood has up to 20% humidity, so it's a moist environment. But it's crispy on the outside, but we have nice sear on the underside, and it'll be tender on the inside. So this can be sliced into wedges for sharing, or we have, if you're entertaining at home, we have the Italian pizzeria plates, you know, where you just slide it whole and everyone has their own individual pizza. They don't have a well, so they lay flat so you can cut them with a knife and a fork. If you put them on dinnerware like this, the larger plates, the center tends to sag. So I want you to taste. This is very mild. And I have salt out and red peppers. You could utilize that if you want, but I want you to first taste the oven and its neutrality. So you should have sufficient crispiness on the outside, but tenderness on the inside that allows you to do that, you know, to fold it over and pick it up. Here we go.
You want that one?
Delicious? Thank you. And sometimes I just bake the dough plain. I open it, put diced rosemary, a little parmigiano, or when it comes out, your best olive oil and a little sea salt, and use it as a flatbread. It's delicious. But you know, the longer the fermentation, the better flavor and development you get on that. So the rationale for not seasoning that tomato is that it acts as its own ingredient in the creation of a lot of different flavors in pizza. Otherwise, if you add all the herbs, wine, everything to the tomato, every pizza you put it on tastes the same.
Oh, really?
So we only made the label as a temporary pizza, so you know.
You do not cut on the boards.
I don't.
I noticed this.
I like these composites, you know, they're indestructible. And when you're entertaining, catering, or you're at a party, or, I mean, they can just be wiped off and you continue to use them. These get, if they circulate back into the pizza making area, they get sticky and wet. That's what we used to say. We could tell where people were from by the shape of their pizza. It looked like Florida or Tennessee, but I just call those handcrafted.
Exactly.
They're handcrafted pizzas. The most important part is that they're an even thickness, you know, except for that little bit of puffy edge. And by the way, that puffy edge is a functional component to the pizza, because as you build it, the pizza with more toppings or wetter toppings, that holds it to the center. In the summer, I stretch the dough and fan out fresh, you know, heirloom tomatoes from the garden, or fresh San Marzanos, olive oil, you know, and it holds all that moisture to the center. Okay, so again, a little bit of that flour, okay? Just direct overhead pressure, resist the urge to pull laterally. If you can't resist that, then put one hand behind your back and use one hand, because it'll make a difference. So flatten it out, okay, and then pull. And remember to keep your hands shoulder width apart. And you'll feel the tension over time, and you'll know when to stop, and just keep going around. If you stop and pull, like sometimes I see people stop and they pull over here, then they go pull over here, that's what really pulls that oven out of a circular pattern, but also it changes the thickness. It's better to keep going in the same. Okay. And as you see, I have a little bit of flour on, which keeps this from sticking onto the peel. And I just mop it up as I go. There's no need to pull it all the way up and down. Thank you. You are so, you're getting good at this, Ed. There's so many cooking classes where people always, wow, you've been doing this so many years. Wow, Ed, you must be really good at it by now. He said, no, I don't have to learn to do that. So this utensil, this is a portion controlled ladle for 4 ounces, and I use just under that on these. But the bottom is flat so that you can spread it and work quickly. You don't want that uncooked, watery, sweet tomato to sit there too long, or it'll, go over the side of the pizza, and the pizza will stick to your wooden peel. So this is the oregano from Calabria. So this is an example. Same tomato, same cheese, but whole different flavor. Kalamata olives. These are salt-cured capers. I import those directly. They're grown in the little island very south of Italy, almost Africa, Pantelleria, and they're cured in sea salt. And we rinse them and soak them to get as much salt off as, to taste. But they're very floral, unlike capers that are in brine, that take on a pickled flavor. This is also delicious with anchovy. Okay, so again, make sure this is sliding. And I also advise people to be careful that it's sliding, because I've seen them make beautiful pizza and then they're talking and they go like this and the pizza takes off across the room. So again, be ready, be assertive when you come up to the mouth of the oven, because this is the warm spot. Shake that off. And the other tip is when you come in, it should be almost level with the oven floor. You don't want to come in at a steep angle, or half the pizza comes off the peel and sticks and the other half will fold on top of it. Shake that off. And I'll make one that's piled up, because no matter how many times we suggest to people that they only put 2 or 3 ingredients on and every pizza has its own flavor, every time you do a pizza party, somebody will pile everything on top of it. But then they take it to you at the oven and it's your job to cook it. So I'll show you how to manage those in the oven. So again, we leave them where they land, and when you're first learning to use the oven, where they land is probably going to be somewhere you didn't intend for it to land. Sometimes they accidentally come off here, sometimes all the way to the back, almost stuck to the wall, but leave them wherever they are and let them steam off into that fire brick. Develop some rigidity on the underside so you can get that turning peel under it and manage the pizza. And these Polinos have a high temperature protective, plastic. It does have a stop mid handle, so it won't go all the way down and get burned. But I recommend using it because you can balance this long tool much more effectively than holding it with both hands at the end. And this is sufficient light. As I said, you need to keep the light so you can make judgments and manage the pizza. But remember, that flame is constantly replenishing the surface temperature of that deck. We know we've heated the bulk of that mass. The job of the flame is just to put what it comes off the very surface, put it back in, and keep your temperature steady. And by having your wood and your fire managed with the log grate, you can come in and tend to the fire with the oven full of food. And you're not at risk for getting ash all over the food, where if you had it in the rear and you had to go in and add more wood, you'd splash ashes onto the cooking food. So again, that aroma, you smell, so the crunch.
Doesn't take long at all.
This would be delicious. These are diced Calabrian chilies, which I recommend. They're absolutely delicious with that combination. So again, I'm turning it until I have the amount of speckled char and browning that I want on the perimeter. And then when I see bubbling through the center, it tells me the heat's penetrated the depth of that pizza. And over time, with experience, the other thing you learn to feel is how heavy or how light this is. As it bakes out water. And so the pizza actually becomes lighter than when it first enters the oven. And you see, just by keeping my thumbs just inside the top edge of that raw dough, I built up that nice perimeter edge. Okay, so same, like I said, same cheese and same tomato base, but a completely different flavor. So please help yourself, and you're welcome to just pick those up with your hands. That's fine.